Hello everyone and welcome to Old World Plus Plus. Here at 6 we obviously focus generally on Warhammer 40k. However, there are a few madmen amongst us who thought, why not give another game system a try at the same time? And we all know more content is better than less content. So with that in mind, we're going to be taking on the challenge of learning the game, painting the models, and we're taking you along for the ride. We're all going to be coming at it from a slightly different angle. Some of us are certainly going to be more interested in the competitive side. Some of us have already got quite a few games in online and that sort of thing. Meanwhile, others of us are perhaps here more for the painting side, the project side, the having a good time and charging enemies with your giant spear side. So you're going to get a big mix here. We've got lots of different armies for you. We have got other members of the channel who are dabbling and might well join us in later episodes. But the basic idea of this is going to be each episode is going to have a focus and we're going to update you on our progress. We're also going to be doing battle reports. One is already out, which has gone down really well. It's gone for like old school, kind of like White Dwarf-esque style. So yeah, we're going to be taking on Old World heartily, and hopefully you enjoy our journey. So without further ado, let's go meet the first person.
Hi, my name is Ed, and I am the indecisive one of the group, I guess. I originally was going to do High Elves in this series, played them, put them on a table for a couple of games, enjoyed the games, didn't enjoy High Elves. I gave Ogre Kingdoms a little bit of a run out in an online event. I have played some Chaos Dwarves. I thought that was going to be quite fun. I really liked the look of the Iron Demon. And then I just thought, I'm struggling with being able to play Old World, to be honest. I'm yet to win a proper game, which has been great. I'm having a lot of fun relearning how to play. But I decided to go with something a little more simple, and I've picked Orcs and Goblins. The game plan for Orcs and Goblins is pretty straightforward. You want to hit your opponents in the face. The models have more movement than the 3-inch Chaos Dwarves that I was running before. And they have one of my favorite armies, one of my favorite units in the army, sorry, which is the Black Orcs. I think they look incredible. I love the old school Games Workshop plastic models. I liked the metal models before that. Definitely going to be running at least one brick of Black Orcs in this list. By the time we get to the full 2,000 points, might well see a couple on there, maybe some characters on interesting mounts as well. So I started playing Warhammer Fantasy back in, I think it was 6th edition, the box set that had Empire and Orcs and Goblins as armies. I didn't have an Orc army. This is the first Orc army I've actually had. My brother, historically, through the years, has been the one who's picked up Orcs. So he had the Orc army when I had the Empire. He had the Orcs when I picked up the Battle for Skull Pass in 40k back in 5th edition, I think it was. So Orcs are fairly new to me. I played for probably only about 8 or 9 years, from age 8 to 15, 16, something along those lines. Then took a break from the hobby in general, came back. I thought, oh, let me check out my 2 favorite sons. Walked into a Games Workshop store and was very upset to see that they had killed one of my 2 favorite children. Age of Sigmar definitely hasn't done it for me. It's basically just 40k but more melee focused. So in my eyes, why would you play the same game, given that I play a lot of 40k? So I'm very jazzed for Old World to be back, and I've been enjoying it immensely. For me, Old World, I really enjoy that it's a completely separate game. You've got to be a lot more structured in your thinking. I think you can do a lot of interesting things with the modeling potentially. I'm not sure that if I will do unit fillers, but if I do go down that route, that is quite a fun modeling potential. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting some games in. I'm not sure if it's been on the screen yet, but as you can see, test model did have to be a Black Orc. I started off just with the base black armor. It was quite fun learning how to do the very typical battered black metal with the the chipping to show the silver underneath. Surprisingly easy. For a test model, I'm very happy with how it came out. Then I realized that it doesn't really show up much, so I kept going back and adding more detail. Red face paint. The blood at the end, I think, is tied all together as well. Give a little bit of color to what is quite a dark model as well. Well, yeah, looking forwards to getting some games in, and there will be some online battle reports coming as well. You may have seen the first one already by the time this video is out.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to my first episode of Old World Plus Plus. My name's Lewis, or Elmo Miniatures. And up until now, I have predominantly played Warhammer 40k. Part of the Plus team, you'll have seen me run my Nids, my Tau, my Imperial Fists, and my Double Valiant Imperial Knights. But I think my history with Warhammer Fantasy Battles goes way back before 40k. It goes right back to probably the early 2000s when I started collecting dwarfs and vampire counts. So fantasy for me has always been the kind of original game that got me into miniature wargaming. And I remember in particular with my dwarves when I first was getting into the game, finding my ranks of quarrelers and cannons being pretty continually overrun by my friend Chris's orcs. As such, I remember at the time switching to vampire counts and attempted to drown his greenskins in zombie bodies. My memory fails me, but I'm pretty sure I still got completely overrun. But I do remember my vampire countess being an absolute combat monster, the rival of any orc warlord. Now, I do love 40k. I love 40k from a competitive standpoint. I really enjoy how quick it plays nowadays. I really enjoy 40k events. Obviously, I run 40k events, and the mission structure and how the primaries and secondaries work with 40k still really appeals. However, I find with 40k personally that I'm find it quite hard not to play that game competitively. Even when I'm trying to run more kind of fun lists, whether it is the Double Valiant or my Hierophant behind me, whatever seems to happen, I find it quite hard to tone down. And I think I've got myself into quite a competitive mindset with 40k, where I find it difficult to not play competitively, even if I'm using a more fun list. Not a problem with fantasy. I have always been absolutely terrible at the game. Yet I've always had a real blast with it. And it was a shame when it changed to Age of Sigmar for me personally, because I loved the way the old game played. So I think even though fantasy with Old World is going to be a more complicated game, so would indicate that it should be played more competitively, I think actually for me it's going to be a much more relaxed and probably more fun experience. And the army that I have chosen to start my Old World journey with and start these Old World plus diaries with are the Vampire Counts. I did think about dwarves, but I can't look past my hordes of skeletons. I just love them. So I'm really looking forward to using my Vampire Counts. I can't wait to see my incredibly expensive vampire implode when she casts a spell. I can't wait to watch my skeletons get completely ground to dust by charging hordes of beastmen. And I'm so excited for the moment where a unit of Blood Knights, when I actually work out how to use them properly, connects with the flank of one of Ed's block of his High Elves in a perfectly executed tactical maneuver, only to then whiff horribly and be run down by the Vengeful Elves. Now, when it comes to why I chose the vampire counts, and I think there's a couple of things that maybe we should all think about when we're choosing an army, and this applies to 40k, Sigmar, whatever game you play, but especially for the Old World. And actually, in terms of the Old World specifically, it's been clear that Games Workshop have decided to go kind of split the factions in half. So that's kind of my first decision, really, when I knew I was going to get into Old World, is I needed to decide personally whether I'd be happy to consider using one of the factions that Games Workshop have decided isn't going to be regularly updated or form part of the main game, these kind of legacy factions. I guess there's a risk that because these armies never get support, they just kind of die a death. But on the flip side, a lot of those legacy armies that you'll find in Old World, like the Vampire Counts with the Soulblight Gravelords, they seem to be part of the newly updated or soon to be updated Age of Sigmar lines. So you end up having those legacy armies having the really, really good new models, which just look fantastic. Some of the Sigmar models, if you're not a Sigmar player, is worth going to look just to kind of drool over the models because they're so amazing. So I obviously decided that I'm not too bothered about the legacy factions, happy to play them, happy to use them. So that didn't really hold me back. I know I'll never be able to take the Vampires to a Games Workshop official event, but I've seen a lot of event organisers, myself included, reassuring people in the community that want to play those legacy factions that the community will find a way to make them work in competitive play. So I'm hoping that doesn't need to be a major concern of mine moving forwards. So once you're kind of over that, I kind of needed to think about what model range, or in terms of the actual physical models or the lore of the models, drew me to them. What did I think looks cooler on the battlefield? What sort of stories have I read that make me love a particular character or an event in a narrative? And kind of come up with an army that I can really feel a part of when I play the game, which is, again, why I chose the Vampires. Personal history going right back to when I first started fantasy, but also I just love the lore behind the vampires in that old world setting. The way they are clearly extremely powerful individuals, but almost entirely ruled by jealousy and emotions, and how they just want to be part of the empire in some respects, or control the empire in some respects, but never quite make it, just because they just let themselves get carried away in a way that I do really enjoy that. And then there's something about the models, especially the new Soulblight Gravelord stuff, those new skeletons, the new zombies, the new vampire models. I think they just look incredible, and I couldn't wait to get my hands on those first few boxes when they came through. And I think finally as well, for those people who are really interested in playing a particular style, or how they want the army to function on the battlefield, I think that's a really, really important consideration when choosing an army for a new game in particular. And actually, I guess there's a lot of people that we probably haven't played this game for ages, so maybe we don't really know how these armies are going to play. So I might well get it wrong, and actually I think I might end up needing to switch something different if I actually find that the play style doesn't appeal anymore. But from my perspective, the idea of just hordes of skeletons kind of refusing to die, refusing to run away, just standing there whilst the vampires just cleave their way through opponents' forces, I think just there's something about that really gets me going. So in terms of a colour scheme, I'm going to show you a test skeleton that I've been painting. Hopefully that'll come up on the screen now for the people that know how to edit these videos at 6++. Anyone that's seen previous armies of mine, if you've seen my Knights or my Imperial Fists or my Tau, you'll know that I usually go for quite kind of bright, clean-looking schemes, very much kind of on the kind of heavy metal style of painting for my armies. So for the Vampire Counts, I wanted to do something really, really different. Obviously, they're a death faction, they're a little bit evil, so I think they will really suit a slightly darker colour scheme. So you'll see from the model quite a dark sort of blue effect over the majority of the model, with really kind of muted metals and things like that. The way I've done this is kind of a little bit backwards from what you would normally see when you think about doing base coats, washes, and highlights. I've actually kind of done all the base coats first, then instead of washing it, done highlights. So kind of blending the colours on the blue, or building up the highlights on the metals and things like that, before finishing, instead of kind of having that as middle step, finishing with the washes. So, and because I'm going for that really kind of dark, muted sort of scheme, there's a lot of washes that have gone over the top of all of the models. So it's got a few layers of Nuln Oil in there, Seraphim Sepia's in there, Athonian Camo Shades all in there, and hope that kind of really kind of dulls down the scheme to a point where hopefully it kind of just feels dirty, it feels grimy, it feels dark, it just feels more evocative of that kind of Vampire Counts aesthetic where they only really come out at night. They're obviously, their armor is thousands of years old, it's all rusted, it's all kind of fading away. And then just like finish off with just some kind of like little bits that kind of pick out particular parts of the model just a little bit brighter. So the eyes in a lot of them, taking me a long time to decide whether to go for red or yellow eyes, but I'm really happy with what I've chosen. I think they're just kind of just a little bit of dash of colour that hasn't been muted down just to kind of finish it off. And the same for when you look at the kind of blue bits of the armour. I've gone for that kind of almost like a lightning style effect, that kind of magical effect that you see on a lot of Night Lords colour schemes. So I thought I'd try and add that in and just see if that could just make little parts of the models just pop a little bit. So yeah, I will be taking the Vampire Counts in this Old World ++ series that we'll be putting together. We're going to be doing a little bit of a slow grow, as you will know. So we start with 500 points and build our way up, hoping to get some battle reports in with the Vampire Counts. So please do get in touch, like comment on the video below, see what you think of my scheme. Do you like it? Have you got any tips for me how I can make it better? Any suggestions for how I can make the Vampire Counts beat Ed's High Elves, because he's a much better player than me and I'm just going to get annihilated. So any advice you can give me on how to crush him to utter dust would be very much appreciated.
Hello guys, Tom, Lowest of Men here, and I'm very excited to talk to you about my involvement in Old World ++. So this is obviously something that other people brought to us. I am always a little bit shy to jump in on additional game systems because I know it's quite a lot of extra work. I've done a bit of Kill Team and I've dabbled in AOS, but sometimes the fads kind of come and go. I remember Horus Heresy, I was thinking, no, I'm not doing this one. But for Old World, there was something about it that really cut to a very nostalgic part of me that I think was true of a lot of us. And I think that's one of the really exciting things about it, as is the opportunity to kind of embark on a little scale-up adventure. I'm a sucker for a slow grow campaign. I really enjoy that kind of thing. And so I've decided to jump in on this one. So I'll talk to you a little bit about my background and my army choice and kind of how I've started hobbying it up as well. So for me, I never played Warhammer Fantasy. I have no background with that. I'm not as old as some of our other players, but I was always very aware of it. It was in White Dwarf and it would be in game stores. I was of the generation where you got into Games Workshop stuff mainly through Lord of the Rings, and that was what I played when I was younger. But I would still occasionally collect the odd model. And I remember having some Warhammer Fantasy Orcs and Goblins, Wolf Riders, things like that I really liked. So I think part of the appeal of its return as a game system is that it does genuinely tap into that fantasy. I was a massive fan of Warhammer Total War. I still play it sometimes, and I love that kind of map-based way of imagining it. I think that's one thing that Sigmar never really does sort of hit the spot for me, is in terms of the lore. I don't think it produces quite as compelling a world. The lore is very cool and interesting, but it's not got that same sort of geographically bounded kind of basis that the old world lore has. And as a historian, I'm a sucker for maps and history and wars and that kind of stuff. And so it's got a sort of legitimacy to me that still really very much appeals. So when it came to picking my sort of involvement in this and what faction I was going to go with, I was guided a little bit by what my kind of favourites were back in the day, and those that know me know I like the baddies, I like the weirdos, I like playing the slightly more unusual factions a lot of the time as well. So I was definitely tempted by Orcs and Goblins, but in the end I decided to settle on Beastmen and Beasts of Chaos. Now Beasts of Chaos appeal to me massively. They're my favourite army to play in Warhammer Total War because you run around raiding and burning things and then eventually someone kills you and that's the end of the game. That appeals to me. Nice simple campaign style. But I also like that kind of sneakiness, the ambush style. I like that it kind of has that mix of hoardy, chaffy units and great big monsters and beasts, which really appeals to me. I also think the range has actually stayed the course really effectively, because although those models now look very old in AOS, for the old world itself, the Beastmen range looks really nice and is really good. And I am hobbying up a bunch of other things at the moment, and I've been looking for a style to apply across a couple of different armies, and I decided that with the Beastmen, with their sneaky mechanics and their quite organic models, this was going to be a really great fit for me. So in terms of approaching it from a hobby standpoint, I wanted this to be something I could put together relatively effectively. I'm not a fantastic painter, so if I can do a scheme that works very quickly and very effectively, then that works really nicely for me. It helps me to stay motivated. So I settled on a scheme that would involve quite a lot of the new contrast paints, going over a kind of zenithal highlight greys and then whites layered over the top, so that you get that immediate popping effect really quickly, and you can then add effects on top. So we've got this little guy here. This is my first Ungor. Here he is. And you can hopefully see on here, he is primarily a lot of different sort of effects for fur and leathers and scraps all around the sort of the model. Lots of different shades of brown, but then I've added for the skin, to get this very distinct icy blue, I've gone with Briar Queen Chill contrast, which I absolutely love. If you're doing a kind of ice themed army, snowy themed army, and I love snowy bases, I think this works really well. So you kind of have that with a little bit of washing in to sort of pick out the muscle detail. And I've then gone with red war paints, which is corn red, and then picking out the detail with Wazdaka red highlight as well. So there's a few nice patches of colour on there with, I think it's Doomfire Magenta for the bright pinks, and Eldari Emerald for the bright greens, which help to give it a little bit of pop here and there. But generally this is quite a sort of a darker, more sort of gribbly looking colour scheme that then allows me to go to town with splashing some blood effects on there on the snow, and getting some Noble's Rot for sort of poison effects dripping on the arrows and the weapons as well. So I think it's a fairly simple but striking scheme that I should be able to replicate across an entire army. Now the next step for me is going a bit bigger. I need to add a few units. I need to get some Bestigor, some big monsters in there perhaps, and some characters. I need to decide if I'm going square bases or just using movement trays, so that's all ahead of me. And I will need at some stage to learn how this game plays, because a few of our team are already well ahead of me. And although I intend to approach this in a fairly casual fashion, I do need to at least be able to actually play a game in a reasonable amount of time. So that's all ahead of me. Really looking forward to getting started. Come with us on our Old World Plus Plus journey, and let me know what you think of the Beastmen. How should I be playing them? Any units I particularly want? Any combos you can point out to me at the start so I can get a bit of a head start. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Hey guys, Chris here, and I am the, I guess you would say, founder of 6++, and I'm in charge of this band of fine merry men. So yeah, really excited for this project. In terms of my history with Old World, pretty similar to how many people got into it really, you know, as a kid. Well, for me it was 40k, and then a side eye at those sorts of those really nice models, and you know, read Lord of the Rings and that sort of thing, and they look quite fancy. So I've no idea what edition it was, but I remember the red box with the Orcs versus Empire. Still got it. They're still all grey. So yeah, that was kind of my start point. But there was always an army that called for me, and that was the High Elves. And I don't have them anymore, but yeah, they were like sprayed white, and this was before the time of like washes and highlights and that. And teenage me was like, I like orange, I like blue. So I had these fluorescent orange and blue High Elves. I think I got the Island of Blood box. Is it the one with Skaven and High Elves? Maybe, I can't remember. But I had that, and I used to really enjoy reading the army books and wishing one day I would have Prince Tyrion on horse. That never happened. I never really played a game. It was just quite complicated. I didn't play really any 40k either. So then moved forward to like my late 20s, and not playing Warhammer of any shape or form. And my friend who I'm playing Magic with says, oh, I've always wanted to get into Warhammer Fantasy. Shall we try it? I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? Look it up. Warhammer Fantasy, no more. Doesn't exist, it's Sigma. So we kind of had a go at that. I did dabble with a few models that I had collected when the book had come out, which was the Bretonians. So a few years previously, or whenever it was, and you know, the new Knights came out, and the Trebuchet and the Men at Arms and that sort of thing. I had some of those, and so we started playing Sigmar, and I played a bit with the Bretonians and that sort of thing, but that soon died off. I got into my 40k, and the rest is history. But the thing that really kind of just hooked me in was, I mean, as a reader, all I read is fantasy books. I'm not interested in any other sort of genre. I've always loved my Lord of the Rings, and the idea of, you know, mass infantry, and just the models are always just so nice. Spells, love a bit of magic. Bit weird considering my army choice. But yeah, just that sort of storyline and that sort of thing I really, really enjoy. So for me, that is what the Old World is. I play 40k quite competitively. The Old World in this project for me is not about doing well, learning the tips and tricks, meta chasing, that sort of thing. For me, it's about exploring the model range, painting up things that I really like, and having fun with it on the tabletop. I don't have the brain power to really involve myself in too big sort of like games. So 40k will stay the competitive one. This is just going to be about having a good time. So with that in mind, in terms of the army choice, it was only ever going to be one of two, High Elves or Bretonnians, because they were the two armies I've collected. And this is quite a pretty army box, isn't it? And it came out straight away. So yeah, as you can probably tell, I am going for the Bretonnians. I've always loved the knights and the medieval aspect. Love myself a trebuchet, or tree bucket, as I said to my dad when I was a teenager. So yeah, I think they're going to look awesome on the tabletop. I'm really excited to kind of like build up the army. I did really struggle with my army theme. When I do these sorts of things, I come at it from like one of two ways. Either I've got a kind of some sort of storyline in my head already, or I want it to be really lore specific and accurate. Now, one thing I did toy with was Musalon and like black armored knights and that sort of thing. I quite like that idea, but I also really didn't want to paint yellow. So I toed and froed on that. Obviously, with the new kind of release of Bretonnians, they're saying all the knights can wear the same outfits or the same armour and that sort of thing. And I was like, okay, so I could paint them all one scheme, but what would that scheme be? There's nothing that really called to me. So then I was like, well, I could do them all individual, as I kind of feel like it should be. But again, it didn't quite look right. And I was really struggling, I'll be honest with you. And then suddenly, one day something just clicked. And as such, I've gone for something quite different to what I imagine everyone else's videos. I'm going to be basing my knights on my team. So the team of 6++, the Mighty Plus. My army is going to be called Knights of the Plus, and each character or each knight is going to be one of the people who play for my team. So there's a website where you can get you type in a surname and you get the heraldry. So I've done that. So I've just got to start working my way through and painting up each model. For me, it's going to be, and this is what people said online, if you're going to do like some are blue, some are red, some are yellow, whatever, the way you get the consistency is through the basing and through using the same blue, the same red, like every time. So that's how I'm going to kind of approach it. So yeah, I have done one, and it was quite fun to paint. Took quite a while, just because of like hobby interest and motivation and that sort of thing. But when I got into it, actually, I did enjoy it. I kind of worked out some techniques that I felt were going to lead to a good outcome. So without further ado, here you are. This is Sir Lee Jones of Milton Keynes, I guess you would say. He is a champion of the unit, as you can see from the sword. Lee is a co-founder of the channel with me, so I'm always indebted to him for setting up this with me. So I thought I'd do him first. You can see from the shield, it's freehanding all of this heraldry is going to be quite tricky. That's why I've not put it on the don't know what it's called, the cloth thing on the side. So I'm not going to do that there. It's just only ever going to be on the shields. But yeah, that's kind of it. Basing, I've gone for like a deserty type theme. And yeah, I think it's going to look really impressive on the tabletop. it's going to take quite a while to do. So I imagine my men-at-arms and bowmen are going to be a bit rough and ready. I have got a tournament booked in July. Still haven't actually opened up the rule book yet, so I've got plenty of time, right? How hard can it be to learn an entirely brand new game system? I'm sure it'll be fun. But yeah, that's me. I hope you really enjoy the content, and yeah, thanks for listening.
Good day. My name is Jack. I'm one of the newest members of 6++, and I'm very excited to be going on this old world journey with the rest of the team. Now, I play a little bit of everything. I play 40k competitively, narratively, and casually. I play Age of Sigmar, I play Horus Heresy, I play Underworlds. I play Warcry, I've played Kill Team, I've dabbled in Necromunda. Basically, if it's Warhammer, I've played it. And so there was never a chance that when Old World was announced and finally released, that I wasn't going to jump onto it. I've been playing Warhammer since I was around 7 or 8. My brothers are much older than me, they got me into the hobby, taught me everything I know, and my earliest memories of playing fantasy are of me trudging my zombies and skeletons at my brother's dwarven gun line and watching his cannons demolish any hope I ever had of beating him at a game. Now sadly, fantasy did die by the time I got to uni, but it is back, and it's stronger than ever. Now I chose, for my army for this 6++ event, that I was going to play Warriors of Chaos. Now, I never played them when I was growing up. However, I think it's hard to argue that the Warriors of Chaos were never not iconic. They are beautiful, always have been, always have had a wonderful aesthetic, and the big thing now is the fact that they still exist in Age of Sigmar, and they've redone all of the warrior sculpts. So you have new Chaos Warriors, you have new Chosen, you have new Knights, and they are just stunning. The only reason I don't already play them in Age of Sigmar is because you only have so much time, but now I have an excuse to. And here we have the start of my army. Now, truth be told, I already have 2k. I have a big problem with just jumping in and buying the entirety of an army whenever I start a new project, but let's hope I haven't made any mistakes. So, truth be told, I already had Celesk and Sigvald. Originally, I was going to do a Hedonites of Slaanesh army, and I was going to use this sort of colour scheme. However, at the time, I didn't particularly like how they actually played, so I ended up putting that army on the back burner. But this is as good an excuse as any to bring out that old colour scheme and make use of some of these models. So Celesk has been rebased along with Sigvald. So Sigvald's now my Chaos Lord, and Celesk is now my Demon Prince. Sigvald, I actually stripped the paint off and did a bit of a redo on him, because I've improved as a painter since then, and I just wasn't happy with him. And then we have my first Warrior of Chaos in the new colour scheme. So it is all this black metal with some brass and gold edging and accenting against dark skin and this sort of rugged yellow cloth. Now, I also plan on being very elite in the way I play my Warriors of Chaos. So it is all going to be Chaos Knights, it's going to be Chosen, it's going to be Warriors of Chaos, and pretty much nothing else. I'm a big fan of what people used to call Hero Hammer. I like having 4 or 5 characters take up the bulk of my points, and I expect them to do the bulk of the legwork for the army. And Warriors of Chaos is quite a good way of doing that, because you can make some really interesting characters with a lot of customization between the marks, the different mounts, the magical weapons they can have, and the chaos mutations. You can make some really cheeky builds, and I really appreciate that. And then behind them will just be anywhere between 20 knights and about 40 chosen/chaos warriors. Is it the best way to play Warriors of Chaos? I don't think it is, but I'll be damned if it isn't one of the most fun ways to play Warriors of Chaos. I plan on being the heavily armoured brick that comes through your window and you just have to deal with me. I'm really excited to get on the tabletop and see if they actually do play that way. I'm less excited that my closest opponent, and probably my most regular opponent in 6++, will be Ed with his High Elves, because that is going to be a lot of arrows I have to wade through before I can get into combat. But we will see and hope.
Hi there, it's me Scrivo. Just going to introduce you to my Old World project. So, yeah, for me, the Old World's a weird one. My very first Warhammer models were actually a box of £5 Orcs and Goblins. So these were the lovely ones with a sword and a shield and a bowman. Really cool models. Painted them when I was 7. Lots of Goblin green bases. Very cool. As the years went on, everyone played 40k, so I never really got fully playing into fantasy, so it never really clicked with me. As a project, it was always something I wanted to do, so when Brian Nelson resculpted and kind of reimagined both orcs and goblins in 40k and fantasy, I did buy some regiments. I had a big old regiment box of them. Those became quickly 40k orc boys by giving them spare slugger arms or shooters, and they live on. They're still in my army now, but they never quite made it to the table, unfortunately. The interesting one is then the Old World kind of came about, and I was very much like, no, never clicked with me. It's something I don't think I'm ever going to engage on, because Heresy dropped this time last year with its reimagining, and I went, nah. I'm going to go into this, guys. This is going to be a big thing for me. I'm going to do Dark Angels. I'm going to have the Lion. It's the only way I'm going to get the Lion in a game. It's going to be fine. Yeah, I built 3 units, and they're all sat in a box still. So I was trying to be sensible and cautious and not do a new hobby project. And I could justify to myself, like, I don't need a Tomb King's army. I've always wanted a Tomb King's army, but I do have a War Master. So 6mm, the tiny little Warhammer armies. I've got an army of them there, so I'm like, cool. I've taught myself out. This is fine. And then the week of the kind of the release of the kind of everything and all the rules was coming out, I made the mistake of watching some videos. My great friend Rob from the Honest Wargamer and the Square Based podcast had done some videos kind of explaining about each of the armies, how their rules worked, and I was just like, I started watching his one about Empire, and I was just like, oh, Empire. That's just the normal guys with the cool things like the steam tanks and wizards flying on griffins and stuff, and it's all crazy. And then I suddenly started getting flashbacks to there was a dark time in both our world and in what was Warhammer Fantasy in 1999 in both timelines, where there was a beautiful game, a skirmish game called Mordheim was released, and I, ironically, quite almost fortuitously, bought that using my Christmas money from a lovely toy shop that I now manage, of all places. And it had a bunch of these human kind of skirmish guys, so all different kind of poses and stuff. They always scratched an itch for me. I was like, Mordheim was such a cool little city because it's meant to be this whole beautiful capital city of this region, a place called Ostermark. And I always thought, that's such a cool place because it was hit by a giant warpstone comet, so it became quite the opposite to what it should have been. And so I kind of like, looking at all this new Empire stuff, I was like, okay, cool. So there was a lot of cool stuff that I've always liked, like the Demigryph Knights, steam tanks, having things like giant greatsword units, having loads of cool cavalry that are themed, like Inner Circle Knights. As a Dark Angels player in 40k, I was like, Inner Circle Knights? Yes, please. Or like, all the things like the units, they've all got different themes to them based on where they're from. And I was like, yeah, why not? So this weird kind of thing spun around in my head. And over the course of about 24 hours, I was like, right. So I really like the idea of doing something Empire themed. And then I looked and like, Ostermark. This scheme looks quite cool. What's Ostermark? And it's where Mordheim was originally the capital city of, and it became this kind of almost the front line of a lot of really positive, like kind of big things. Like Sylvania is on its borders. There's a load of kind of forests where a lot of the kind of chaos incursions were coming from. So to me, I was like, well, this is a perfect place to be set. And then I was like, but also this is set before Mordheim, so I can play up this angle and to be like, well, for my narrative, my guys they're all really happy-go-lucky guys because they're all being given like their own houses to live in the capital city of Ostermark, and it means their families for future generations will be able to live in perfect happiness, and they're kind of building their future. the reality is it's not going to happen, is it? It's going to be a bit pants, really. But yeah, so as you can see on the model, just coming up now, I've gone with an Ostermark theme. I looked at it and I fell in love because it is a quartered scheme, which I'm always terrified of, but it's got purple and yellow. So instead of just going the obvious kind of bright colours, I followed kind of how dyes generally would work for peasants. So it's more of a burgundy and it's Towlight ochre. So it's Barracknar burgundy, Towlight ochre, then with a bit of a wash of Agrax in the recesses. So the theory being is like, although these are well looked after and well to do sort of peasants with their uniforms kind of new, it's still using the cheaper dyes, which I think kind of, it's nice to have those kind of historical references. So so my plan is I'm just going to go with a mixed arms force really with it. So over the course of the next couple of months, hopefully you'll see me kind of expand it. So until next time, guys, cheers.